Hi class, this is introducing Chapter 5, Human Development. It is an amazing chapter. It is jam-packed with information. In fact, it's a 16-week course that I teach here at NPC. So it is the one class when I'm teaching one class in the course of my semester where I'm probably going to go to not going to finish it all in one class session is this chapter. There's just so much information in it. So I'm going to try to highlight certain points that I think are important as we go through it. The first is there's a nice introductory film looking at fetal development that is just so cool. It's just the right way to start this particular chapter. Human development is about change. Is about both change and continuity. How do we change? What stays the same? Process begins before birth in the prenatal environment of the mother's womb. In fact, lifespan, it takes the same perspective that Sandrock takes in the text that we use, that lifespan begins at conception. Life begins at conception and ends at death. So first, the developing fetus, brain is the first major organ to form, then the heart. A week later, we pass more milestones inside the womb than we ever will after we're born. There are three distinct stages. There's the germinal stage, there's the embryonic stage, and then there is the fetal stage. So the three components. The germinal stage is an interesting stage. It begins at conception, lasts for about 2 weeks, and it's where the fertilized egg, what they call a zygote, divides rapidly around 36 hours after conception, and it floats on down the fallopian tube. You'll see it. You'll see it in your text there, the picture of the fallopian tube and the cell going down. And what it is kind of interesting is it takes about 10 to 12 days. Some texts will show 14 days for conception to occur, for it to invade the uterine walls. How some authors will describe it. Then we have the embryonic stage, and that's again marked by the formation of the major organs, the nervous system, eyes, ears, arms, legs, all those type of things, teeth, palate, external genitalia, and this continues until about 8 weeks after conception. And then the fetal stage, and this begins about 8 to 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks of just what they call gestational age, and that's when the heartbeat can be detected with a stethoscope. So that fetal stage is there until the birth of the child. Let's see, I'm going to skip around. There's so much information, and I can't have a really long video because they just don't allow it here. Some things that you want to be aware of is nature-nurture influences with fetal development, and that brings us to the component of teratogens. So teratogens is from the Greek word tera, which means monster. Teratogens are anything that affects the child as it's being developed, or affects the development of the child. Viruses can be a big thing. Rubella virus is a very serious concern. In fact, what's interesting is that they rarely talk about it now. You've heard recently you've had like measles outbreaks, and people are always concerned about getting measles, but nobody ever talks about women that are pregnant. Back in the 1964, 65, if I remember correctly, I think that's when it was, we had a measles outbreak. In fact, I had measles, and it was pretty amazing. As I went to school, I had like X-Men powers. Women were running away from me. My teachers were running away from me, which was not necessarily an unpleasant thing for me at the time. But at that time, there was, I believe, I'm trying to recall exactly, there was like 200,000, I believe there was 200,000 affected babies and 30,000 neonatal deaths associated with this measles outbreak. And surprisingly, nobody ever talks about it when they mention about these measles outbreak. But that's an example of a teratogen. And again, it is an illustration of nature versus nurture. Nature being your genetic makeup, nurture being your environment. This is an example where the environment of the child as they're developing is affected. and consequently affects the health of the child. Going quickly, guys, because there's so many parts here, and I want to make sure we cover it all. Thalidomide is another example. Thalidomide is not discussed in your text, but I always mention it. Thalidomide was a drug that was given in the 1950s, 1960s. Here by prescription. In Europe, you could get over the counter, like you get aspirin there, and it was supposed to combat morning sickness. What we have found is that it had horrific effects on the children as they were born. You'll see some children, based on when the mother took thalidomide, if they took it when they were 2 weeks pregnant, maybe they would be born with no hands. 3 weeks, no forearms. And it's bilateral, so it wasn't like just one side was affected, both sides were affected. Again, an example of nature versus nurture and the role of a teratogen. They've outlawed thalidomide for the most part, although it still is prescribed here in America, usually for AIDS patients, patients that are HIV positive, to combat the nausea that they experience with that. All right, moving along here. There's so much information. I want to skip over, there's sensory development. I'm going to skip over that. I want to go over to some of the theories, because these are kind of the crux. The first one they talk about is Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget was an interesting man. He had his approach he's a cognitive psychologist, so his approach is very much about thinking process. In fact, he would espouse that that a child would develop absent of social interaction. I'm not so sure about that now, though. But he had 4 phases: the sensorimotor, pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational stage. He said what happens is that we organize the world into schemas. These are like mental constructs, shortcuts to make sense of the world. And as we make adaptations to our organization of the world, we do that by assimilating and accommodating new information. So in class, what I do is I ask a student, are you afraid of dogs? Or do you like dogs? Usually I pick somebody who likes dogs. And I'll mention that I'll bring in my Labrador, Elsie, who's a loving dog. And we'll say that the only time they've seen a dog was on TV, and it was a yellow Labrador that rescued ducklings and helped pull people across the street, that type of thing. And so that was a positive. Their schemas of dogs is that all dogs are going to heaven based off of that. So then I bring in a dog. So again, using Jean Piaget's, we're going to have to assimilate and accommodate new information and making an adaptation to the organization of the world. So I bring in my dog, Elsie, and she's loving, and Labradors, they're great dogs. And so they'll come and they'll pet Elsie, and lo and behold, it's like, yes, dogs are great. All dogs are going to heaven. I know that, based off of Elsie. So then I bring Elsie out, and I bring my daughter's dog, Bentley. Now, Bentley's got issues. He's a Chihuahua, so that should tell you something right away, right? He has got issues. And so I bring him in, and he's like snarling, growling, spitting, And I asked the student, are you going to pet Bentley? And most of them will say no. But I say, remember, you're naive. You're thinking all dogs are going to go to heaven. And so in that case, they reach out there, and they'll say they reach out there to pet Bentley, and Bentley goes for the neck. And so we have to bring the jaws of life, separate Bentley from them. This is all going on in the classroom, guys. Not literally, figuratively. I do this all figuratively. And then I asked them, so what happened now? What did we learn, according to Jean Piaget's theory, by assimilating and accommodating new information? And they'll say, wow, yeah, not all dogs are going to heaven. I said, yeah, exactly. In fact, now we know that some dogs are going to the same place where cats go. Just kidding. I like cats too. All right. So that's Jean Piaget's theory. So he says we go through different stages. Sensoromotor, where we take in the world through our senses. Pre-operational. Go over my notes here real quick. I don't want to talk about the limitations. So we've got pre-operational. An operation is being able to do a task in reverse. Like, for example, if I rolled out a long thing of Play-Doh, and say I had two Play-Dohs both the same size, one I rolled out, I would say is A, so A and B is here, B I roll out, is now B the same as A? Somebody with a pre-operational stage would not be able to say that. They would think, no, it's different shape. But in fact, that's because they can't do an operation. That's why it's called pre-operation. An operation is doing things in reverse. So if I had rolled that snake back up, I would say, yeah, they're still the same size. Then we've got concrete operational stage where they're able to perform those mental operations. And then there is a formal operational stage, and that's where they're able to think more hypothetically. Just scrolling down, guys, with my notes here. I didn't discuss the limitations just because there's not a lot of time. It's going down. Lev Vygotsky, interesting guy. He died at age 39 of tuberculosis, and he really was he put a contrasting view to PHA. PHA was very much cognitive. Lev Vygotsky says we don't learn anything in a vacuum. In fact, we've got this interactions with others that helps us to develop. And he was actually a little bit criticized because he was a bit critical of some cultures that were not very verbal or not very interactive with that. So there's Lev Vygotsky with his zones of proximal development. Now I'm going to jump over, just because I'm running out of time already. Let's go over to adolescence. So much information here. So much information. So we go to adolescence. I do want to discuss it a little bit here. During adolescence, we've got so in using Piaget's theory, we've got two limitations. This is again cognitive development. Two limitations, and that is imaginary audience and I'm going to get my notes here for you. Imaginary audience and personal fable. That's why teenagers do the things they do. So if you bring your teenage son into school, your teenage daughter, I bet you they're like my teenage kids. I could not go to Walmart. They think that everybody's watching them. That's this imaginary audience. That's why when you take them to their first dance, nobody's dancing because they think everybody's watching them. Well, then everybody is watching them because they're the only one out there dancing. But there's this imaginary audience that follows them around. There's also a personal fable, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing because that's what makes them move out. They think that they're indestructible. So I always tell, had I known what I know, I probably would have never moved out. I probably would have just stayed at home. But yeah, it's good. Good to have that personal fable, that belief, and move out there. It's also why the military wants them. They want somebody who's 18 years old as opposed to my age, because they think they're going to take the hill. The bullet's going to go through them. They're going to go kill the guy anyways. Me, I know I'm going to die before I get off the plane. And so those are some limitations according to Piaget they've got to get past to go to the next stage. That's an example of his limitations. All the stages have got limitations that they've got to get through to get to the next stage. All right, those are some highlights there. And go early adulthood. Just early adulthood is a time of developing our own identity, career identity, sexual identity, gender identity, ethnic identity. It's figuring out who we are apart from our parents and solidifying that process. It's a time of developing relationships. We have middle adulthood when we're starting to see some loss of our sensations, senses, perception, loss of hearing, vision. People getting reading glasses. Mine isn't reading glasses. People get reading glasses. Those type of things. And then late adulthood, age 65 and older, that's when we're seeing a decrease in brain mass. Just as a side note, the one way to prevent that from occurring is aerobic exercise. Over and over and over again. Research is going to go back to aerobic exercise. I've been doing this for a lot of years. That's the one thing that stood still. Somebody said to take omega-3 and do this diet and do that diet. The one thing that always stands still, aerobic exercise. And then the last thing is we talked about dementia. Dementia is probably the scariest thing. In fact, most people are more afraid of getting Alzheimer's than they are of cancer. The man John Watson, who unraveled the DNA, won a Nobel Prize for that. When they wanted his DNA tested, he said, "Yeah, I'm okay with testing it. Just don't tell me if I have Alzheimer's." We're panic about that, and so it is a concern there. In fact, I have a video clip there of a woman with Alzheimer's, mother with Alzheimer's, just to put a face to the name. And so, guys, that finishes up this chapter. It is jam-packed, very interesting chapter, and it really kind of is an introduction into Psych 240. So, hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed teaching it, and it's a lot of fun putting the information together. Thank you so much, guys.